Let's Talk Call-In Radio. And here we are. It's Let's Talk Call-In Radio. And...
Want to light our fire?
What? Oh, the bonfire? Oh. Oh, you want to talk.
Oh, no.
Well, okay. Why am I not...
Oh, yes,
doesn't
headphones.
sound right. Something doesn't sound... There.
Discombobulated.
Tourist drivers.
Yes, there's a lot of them roaming about town right now.
This is Let's Talk Call-In Radio. And getting to the root causes of issues that affect us all, I think. This on-the-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492. Your hosts today, Shelley Rudd.
Good afternoon.
Stephen Hurwitz.
Hi.
And I'm Paul Raffel. Happy 4th, everybody, or whatever one says on the 4th of July. What do you say? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Happy
Bang
4th
it
of
up.
July.
And today we are talking about, and we would like to hear from, of course, all our listeners that are listening at this time. When you call in, let the phone ring until you hear a funny little noise. That's me putting you in the system, and then wait until you hear me say you are on the air, and then give us a name and turn down your radio, and please... watch your language. Keep it clean, folks. Live radio. And today we are talking about where our clothes are made and the problems with the especially fast fashion industry and environmental, social, worker safety problems, all that sort of stuff. Sweatshops and environmental degradation, and the sustainability of fabrics and pesticides on cotton, all that wonderful stuff.
Let's not talk fabrics.
And we will be talking today with an expert on this subject. And that is Tiffany Simoy-Davey, who is involved with an activist organization called FashionRevolution.org. And Tiffany is with us. Hello, Tiffany. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Hi,
Good
Tiffany.
morning.
Hello, good morning.
Welcome to the show.
Or afternoon, the top of the afternoon.
That's right.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you are with, you've done work with FashionRevolution.org, which is a sort of a watchdog organization, international organization?
Yes, it's an international organization that began 6 years ago, following one of the major disasters that we endured in the fashion industry. That was based in Bangladesh, but it was a major call for further action to be taken globally.
Remember that?
Yeah, there were those two sweatshop disasters, one big fire and another one collapsed.
Yeah, the building fell down.
Oh, dear.
Right.
Terrible. And that did seem to spur a lot of activist outrage. And since then, there have been a few changes made, and several companies have sprung up that are more sustainable, let's say, and more socially conscious. Is that true? I mean, is it actually getting better?
You know, it's nowhere close to where it needs to be. but it does bring up many questions. I think a lot of the work that came from Fashion Revolution asking who made my clothes, that's what they gave as their major campaign question, just to get those of us who no longer have production happening around us in our own countries to beg the question, who made my clothes, what conditions are they working in, and how are we going to, really solve this. Fashion Revolution has produced and just released, actually late in April during Fashion Revolution Week, a Fashion Transparency Index, and they survey over 400 companies and give scores on a variety of these factors.
Huh.
Yeah, I think, most of us, I'll include myself, we go through our day and we go shopping and we don't really realize that the reason our clothing is so inexpensive in some, that's what a lot of us are looking for. Where are the good deals?
Right.
And a lot of those good deals happen because of the conditions under which people, have to endure to make those clothes so cheaply for us.
I think that's one of the trade-offs we've made practically in every product. We've exported the labor and we've exported the environmental damage. So, it doesn't have to be discussed in this country. It's just not in our face.
So you used to have a clothing store, right, Stephen?
I did. I used to manufacture clothing, actually.
Okay, so was the clothing made on site?
Clothing, no, but it was made in San Francisco. We used to have an active manufacturing, and it was mostly Chinese. And there were, there were two kinds of places. You could see shops in somebody's garage with 4 or 5 sewers. On the other hand, there were bigger shops in warehouses and took over large spaces. There were 2 different kinds, big cutting tables, etc. I don't know if that exists anymore, to be honest with you. You had these big companies like Corette, etc., and they really supported the industry. And but I don't know. I went out of business actually at the time that manufacturers were sending their manufacturing overseas. You just could not compete. You could not compete. And people over there. I mean, we traded. Maybe not the greatest labor costs for slave labor, really.
Yeah.
Would you call that slave labor?
Tiffany?
Yeah, I definitely. It's very close to it. I mean, in the case with Rana Plaza, you had all of these employees who were basically told to enter the building or they wouldn't receive their wages that they'd already worked for, and that clothes had already been sent out around the world. So I would say that that's a condition of slavery, like withholding wages to work in inhumane conditions, as well as the daily conditions that a lot of workers do face through different kind of slash and burn production techniques that larger corporations are able to use on a daily basis.
Right. I'm sure the time, I'm sure we didn't talk about an 8-hour workday either.
No, and I had actually worked for a factory that had produced in Los Angeles about 10 years ago, and I could just see how that was becoming increasingly harder to do without, like, overexpansion becoming an issue, as well as, they were facing at the time the legalization questions, having workers that weren't documented and trying to stand up and support that. So it brought a lot to question because those were where much of the skills for that existed in Los Angeles. So.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering. I remember seeing or reading about some of the bigger companies, more well-known companies that were called on these things, said they were going to have inspectors go into the shops, et cetera, and they had scores in terms of working conditions. Is that really happening, Tiffany?
It isn't. It isn't. What's kind of what's going on with the Fashion Revolution Transparency Index is calling out and asking for. They have different suppliers, gold, silver, and bronze, giving us the data on where these factories are located. Bronze doesn't have even much information available as it stands at the moment. So it's not happening fast enough, and I would say with the way we're expecting there to be more factories. So it's going to become increasingly a problem of monitoring that. But we're also operating in places that don't have protections for women, and therefore that being a large populace. I mean, like in Bangladesh, there's many other issues there. Fashion is one more of the big ones, but the whole perspective towards women and young children working, it's not quite happening at this moment.
So what are some of the things that we as consumers can do to become more informed and make better choices and have an impact on positive change?
There's a variety of things. I think I saw something wonderful this past year, and it was like the hierarchy of needs. And there are 7 to 8 different ways that folks already can kind of change the way they consume fashion. Asking who made my clothes, yes, it's a good way to stop and think about it. But we see labels with the country on the end, and the question is, do I not buy from this country? You don't know where the really what the end conditions are. So it's not quite that, but secondhand has always been one of the answers. Thrift stores. There's a growing industry of sustainable fashion, as well as directories that will lead you to finding out more about that. I would urge folks to also take a look at the Fashion Transparency Index and to see where some of your favorite labels already fall in the index, and how you can urge them to do better. Because we're not able to take them out of the discussion. They're not going to shut down these factories. So really trying to probe for transparency in their processes will get them to change. I mean, H&M has really launched a campaign, and a lot of the work that Fashion Revolution and Clean Clothes Campaign are doing are to really fact-check and make sure that that work is actually happening. It's easy to run a campaign as a clothing company saying that you're ethically producing clothing, but we would need to see further proof of that.
So, Fashion Transparency Index. I just Googled it.
You're so.
Yeah, it's actually on fashionrevolution.org. If you were to go to the resources, they have guides for how to be a fashion revolutionary, really just ways you can start to change small things and purchases, not quite even addressing overconsumption yet, but how do you start to make slow changes as a consumer? And that's another thing that I feel I always want to not fully place the blame on the consumers, as the industry has changed in much of our time in the past 30 years here. So how do we get these companies to really ask, these questions, or answer the questions, I should say?
Yeah. It takes consumers making a fuss to make these companies change. It's a $2.5 trillion industry now, the fashion industry, and overconsumption, as always, is part of the problem, right? Because we're all buying too many clothes and then not wearing them enough. And
that's what the marketing does, right? Yeah. Oh, you must have the latest, this or that. Yeah. It's a real problem across the board, not just in fashion. Yeah.
Truly. And that doesn't really show any sign of slowing down.
No.
In fact, I would say that I'm seeing more than ever more advertisements towards consumers to become fashion producers. And also in an age that we're in where social media and identity, you have many celebrities taking calls to produce their own labels, or quote-unquote influencers, brand ambassadors being called to, learn how to start your own T-shirt company, and that is
I was thinking the same thing.
Right. And reusing, recycling. I just wear clothes until they fall apart. That's
yeah, me
Notice
too.
that.
So I'm looking at the Transparency Index, and there's a list of brands and retailers that have significantly increased their level of disclosure overall, which include Dior, Sainsbury's, Nike, New Balance, Marc Jacobs, VF Corporation, on it goes down the list. And the top 5 high-scoring brands in 2019 are Adidas, Patagonia, Esprit, that's interesting, H&M, and C&A.
Very interesting, really.
Yeah. Well, Patagonia's been at the forefront of sort of sustainable clothing, although I'd say Patagonia was probably responsible for a lot of the microplastics that are in the environment with their fleeces.
Well, yeah, and of course, everyone's wearing leggings and jeans that have stretch, and that's all, that's all plastics. That
I think there's no win, because when you consider cotton, it's probably one of the most sprayed, fertilized, pesticides.
Yep.
When I was in business, one of the things we advertised, being pretty unaware of it all, was 100% cotton. Mm-hmm. People did not want blends, and so we were 100% cotton, but really was not aware of how they got that stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's the second largest crop. Is that right?
That I don't know, but the business of dyeing the cotton is also very destructive, very
poisonous
polluting.
Dyes.
Yeah.
And then you're wearing these poisonous dyed, impregnated, pesticided GMO fabrics on your body and sleeping in them and sleeping in sheets that are made that way. Aye.
Yeah.
This is Let's Talk, and Shelley Rugg, Steve Hurwitz, and Paul Raffel here in the studio. We're talking to Tiffany Simoy-Davy. Give us a call, won't you, if you have thoughts about the fashion industry, the clothing industry, and
who made your clothes?
Who made your clothes? It's a good one. That really humanizes it instead of it just being, it came from a factory. No, It came from somebody's hands moving stuff around. Give us a call, 663-415-663-8492. Oh, and look at that. Like magic, we have a caller. Hi, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, Paul. It's MK.
MK. Hi.
Hi, I have a question for your lady on the...
Tiffany. Yeah.
Our guest host.
Yeah.
Hello.
Our guest. Hi. I love fashion, and on my Facebook page, there are a number of Asian companies that are advertising linen and cotton and flowy sort of Asian design clothing. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about this kind of marketing that's going on, because obviously everything's made in China. So, do you know what I'm talking about?
Are you speaking about the models themselves, or the companies being based in Asia?
The companies are based in Asia, because I've ordered a couple of things from them, and I'm telling you, if you order anything from those places, be really sure you know what you're doing, because the sizing's crazy. It's all tiny little stuff. You can put your toe in.
It's completely different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
there's a point
customer
where
service is terrible. Their customer service is terrible.
Yeah.
And if you get something and you don't like it, it doesn't fit, you might as well just give it to the Goodwill, because trying to return stuff to them is hopeless.
Yeah, of course.
That's too bad.
Well, buying stuff online, there's always that problem.
I've had really good luck a couple of times. I have one dress that I absolutely love.
What color was it?
Frog clothing, and I wear it all the time. It's cotton.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like a traitor to the country. You know,
There's an interesting point, especially I just read this article on the Adam Smith Institute, which you know is going to be really all for sweatshops. And sure enough, sweatshops are good for poor people in other nations.
Is that right?
Yes.
I was going to ask about
that.
that.
So, great for them.
So we're good because it's send work to them.
It's the first stepping stone in getting to a better life. You're making money. It's better than being outside doing begging or on the street or whatever. And it's just like the Industrial Revolution in Britain that created this whole society that we have today. Blah, blah, and more blah, I would say.
Oh, boy.
Sweatshops are good. Oh, man. But on the other hand, there's a good... I came across a site. It's called thegoodtrade.com, and it has a list of 35 fair trade and ethical clothing brands in the U.S. and in the U.K. and Canada, I think. And,
do you get them online?
Yeah. And I needed some underwear. I just ordered some organic cotton underwear from a Colorado company, Packed. Yeah.
That's in the U.S. That's good.
Yeah. I don't know where they're made.
I don't know where the cotton comes from, but...
Non-GMO cotton, that's the main thing. For me, anyway.
I guess I didn't really have a question. I just was sort of wondering about there are so many of these companies that keep popping up and popping up and popping up. And they all have weird names, and a lot of the stuff is duplicate. I mean, they're selling the same stuff. So I wondered if anybody knew if there was like one great big company that had little pockets of itself.
Well, that's really possible. You look at a company like The Gap is also, Banana Republic is also, so many companies under one umbrella. And it seems like all these completely different companies, but they're all one.
Different market segments.
But I know what you mean, MK. On Facebook, there are these ads that are, and most of the names are something and something, like, I don't know, Mather and Cotton or something, and they all have that same kind of name, so it's Hook and Willow or something like that. And yet they're all kind of the same.
They're just marketing to us white ladies.
Yeah, and some of the copy shows that these are not English-speaking people who have written it.
Oh, right.
It's crazy. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Some of it is like, okay, I could buy that, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Either does anybody else.
They don't have my sizes anyway. So
I've got a question for Tiffany. We run into this dilemma where you boycott a brand, and you're really just putting maybe this is Adam Smith stuff, but you're putting hundreds of people out of business. And so I just remember with Keurig, they had a shop company over in the West Bank, and they had 300 employees, and they made those little coffee things. And people boycotted them, so they moved their plant out of the West Bank over to Israel and hired a bunch of Israelis. And so there is that dilemma. What do you guys say about all that?
Well, I feel that boycotting is not necessarily the most effective way to push change within the industry, because they'll find ways to reach a new consumer. If it's not you and your 1,000 friends or your 1 million out of the billion, they will still have ways to reach consumers.
So it
really is with a lot of work.
Yeah.
There's much work to do environmentally as well, because, they're changing their base, and most likely that'll change not the environment of the workers.
So if
were you going to say something?
If boycotting isn't the most effective method, what is more effective?
And it's definitely not necessarily calling out either. I think it really is supporting organizations that are already working towards either increased transparency or pushing for actual legislation that'll change what's done. Because, I mean, there's not much by way of legislation here to ban microfibers, for instance, but in the UK, that's banned, and that forces industry-wide change. So it would be going after legislation that creates a law, then it's something that's no longer something that they can technically do. And that's when you then open up other avenues for things to be dealt with. And
I would be absolutely... Sorry. No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, it'll open up more doors for things to actually change, not just our idea of what change may be. If we say, okay, well, we're no longer going to support this one single brand that's doing this one thing, much like our friend MK just said, as far as then she sees another ad, then it's just going to be another company that you could just change your name and change your advertising. And
I'd be thrilled to buy American. I mean, but I like linen clothes, and I like things that hang well and are made well and will last a long time because I wear them over and over and over. But I can't afford them. I mean, I have a friend who makes these beautiful linen tunics and clothes and stuff, but you have to pay $250 for an apron, and it's a lovely apron.
Wow.
But that's for Martha Stewart or somebody who.
That's a lifetime apron right there.
That's a lifetime apron. That's
well,
truly,
that makes me think about this whole thing, and in terms of the cost to consumers. We're so used to being able to find a $20 pair of pants or a $20 top or a $20 dress, that if it's more expensive, it's harder for us to go there. And it seems like, if we can get the industries to change how who they're hiring to make the clothes and paying them better and giving them better conditions, the costs have to go up.
Yeah.
Right. It does. And another thing is, I got this copy of Vogue magazine sitting beside me. I'd like to look through it because I think that fashion is sort of a symptom of how we're doing. And the prices are ridiculous, for one thing.
Well, yeah, but their customer is completely different. I mean, they're appealing to a completely different segment of the market.
But I like that sort of stuff, even though I'm not in the ballpark of being able to afford it. I love to see what people are thinking and dreaming up and the rest of it, because it's creative for the most part.
Right.
But it's so competitive that if you have... They keep outpricing each other and outcooling each other, and it depends on what kind of spin you've got on your clothes. If they're going to be like the next wonderful thing that Kim Kardashian wants to get, and she can spend $5,000 on a pair of sneakers, and then the next year they do the same thing over and over
we can tell again. You're unhappy about it all.
Well,
brokenhearted.
MK, thank you very much.
I'm a very good shopper, so fun. Anyway, good to talk to you guys. Happy 4th of July.
Thank you.
Happy holiday.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
People don't realize that the cost of clothing, it really dropped probably by half when we started making our clothing in China. Sure. Clothing was a lot more expensive. And, Shelley, what we're really talking about is in every industry, Americans are not paying the true cost because we're not paying the environmental costs. They dump in the water and in the air. These are all costs. And if we have to start paying the price...
we're not earning enough. We're not being paid enough ourselves to live.
There you go.
So the whole thing is out of balance, clearly.
And just to remind you all, this is KWMR, Point Reyes Station, 90.5 in Point Reyes Station, 89.9 in Bolinas, 92.3 in San Geronimo Valley, streaming live everywhere in the world on KWMR.org and on our mobile app for your phone, for your Apple or Android. And we have another caller. Hi, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Oh,
Hi, this is Gail.
Hi, Gail.
Hi, Gail.
How are you? Good show.
Hi, Gail.
Obviously, Stephen and I have talked about this before because I was actually going to say something about the true cost of clothing. That's translated into every area, whether it's food or clothing or the things that we buy. If people had to pay the true cost of producing things, they would be, maybe we would go back to the times when people made their own clothing and they made or bought things that were of high quality and they lasted a long time. And, the rubric would change. But anyway, it would have to shift the whole perspective, the whole relationship to like what we have right now, the new color of the season, the new style, skinny pants, bell bottoms, whatever. Anyway, and I also wondered about the about these companies that are sustainable. Like sometimes I wonder when something says that it's ethically produced or that no child labor was involved and things like that. How believable is that stuff? Fair trade chocolates and things like that. I don't really know. It just seems that a lot of what we consider even organic food is factory farmed organic food or factory farmed organic dairy, where it's only a step above what the other guys have been doing. Like, how do you really keep track of whether you're even, you think you're doing the right thing or the better thing, and is there a way to really know if you are in fact supporting the things you think you're supporting?
Well, that's where Tiffany and Fashion Revolution comes in, right, Tiffany?
Right, and Fashion Revolution likes to link to key partner organizations that are also doing work far and wide. So there's the Fair Trade Federation that really works with brands as well as Fair Trade Certified. This has two, Fair Trade Certified being a part of Fair Trade U.S.A. While they're promoting it, there is much work that's been done that, at least for those companies that seek and strive for that, and there are not that many that are fair trade comparison to how many we would have current day, that are really already doing the work and that are committed. And then that becomes a much more, I would say, fragile process of continuing to check in on these companies, because doing the work for an inspection versus that being your everyday 365 days a year, modus of operandi, that's really where I would say overconsumption and different things are going to be called, because as we were saying a moment ago, with how much is being made, it's still going to, at the end of the day, be something that potentially ends up as waste in another country.
Yep.
And that's one of the larger problems with fashion is there is that I'm going to only wear this once, or it's made so poorly that it's going to get thrown away after 5 uses. Or fair trade will at least guarantee a longer life, but it still doesn't answer the question of overconsumption. So
yeah,
it's steps in the right direction. And it's great that there's so many people doing work. I know that here in my city, we just opened up a local fair trade store, and they're carrying seven different brands. They're very small operations that you can definitely know are fair trade. And so that's the start.
Yeah, so you look for the logos and the stickers on products of reputable watchdog organizations, and that gives you at least a fair chance that the company is actually doing what it says, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, and there's also little partnerships, because we have this movement here, for the better businesses that have taken on a pledge to be sustainable in their actions and in the way they treat their workers and the effect on the environment and such. And, that creates a bigger demand for these products and these services and the certifications, I would imagine. So that hopefully there's just more and more momentum. developing.
Right.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how, 2 generations ago in my grandmother's era, that things were made to last. Like that was somebody's slogan, made to last. And you chose quality fabrics, quality construction of whatever, whether it's clothing or other things that you needed, your furniture in your home, quality. And now, we've got IKEA build-it-yourself furniture, right? But,
right.
It's hard when we're in a culture where it's a throwaway society. Everything's thrown away, and we don't see it. Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. Kids go to the mall and just buy
for fun.
Buy a shirt, buy a dress,
shopping.
buy a cheap T-shirt with glitter on it or something. The idea that clothing is something that you can just wear a couple of times and then throw away.
We don't mend it. We don't fix it.
Very American thing. There was a film made, a documentary, The True Cost, made a couple of years ago. I haven't seen it yet, but I've been reading about it.
It's fantastic.
Yes, it looks really great. And one of the suggestions they say is when you buy something, you ask yourself, am I going to wear this 30 times at least?
Oh.
So what do you think about, these companies that are springing up where you actually can literally rent clothing, or you use things a couple of times and you return them? I mean, they've actually gotten very popular.
Bridal dresses, these.
Well, much more than bridal dresses, though. I mean, it's a huge...
Right, office clothing,
fashion brands.
Exactly. So, but again, the notion that it will be out of fashion, but you won't necessarily own it, it'll be something that gets passed along. So, anyway.
Right.
That sounds great to me. What do you think, Tiffany?
Well, I think that's one way you can, curb your overconsumption and then throwing it away. You keep it in a more circular rotation within your own economy. It's one of those solutions that is becoming increasingly popular, especially as folks do realize that they don't wear things that much. They're going to buy a shirt, they're going to wear them possibly 7 times, and they're done with it. They're on to the next trend. So that answers that problem of that specific consumer, as well as gives opportunity for folks to not fully invest in a piece for its lifespan. So,
is there a way to not to just recycle clothing or take it to the thrift store or whatever, but actually the textile itself? Are there ways you can recycle fabrics anymore?
There are some that are already doing work with that, and they're starting off like smaller operations here. As it stands now, we send about one large ship, or with multiple from the port with multiple shipping containers filled with clothes that then get sent to another destination. They strip, debutton, de-zipper, really rid of all of its embellishments, and a lot of that becomes a relief blanket. That was just one specific, I believe in Panapat, that was one destination in Western India where that's the end product.
So,
Yeah,
let me let you go, Gail. Thank you for calling.
Thank you, Gail.
Bye-bye.
I can't help but think that all of this is just one more example of overpopulation.
Well,
you've got all those people that need jobs. The overconsumption is based on keeping people working. You start lowering your consumption, and all of a sudden you've got all these people that are out of jobs. Yeah. It's an endless cycle. Somebody is going to get hurt. Either the environment's going to get hurt, the workers are going to get hurt.
Too many people. This is
too many people.
Well, that's another show. It's poverty is, of course, the root of most of the problems that we talk about on this show. Just want to plug, though, locally here in Point Reyes Station, we have, of course, the marvelous thrift store where people can take clothing that is still good and you don't want to wear anymore, and I've found some wonderful stuff in there. And we have, two high-quality clothing stores in town, Susan Hayes and Epicenter.
And Koyuchi.
Koyuchi making bedding and organic cotton
sheets
robes.
And robes, yeah. We're very lucky in Point Reyes Station.
Well, and there's also the store Bloom, which is a used clothing store, consignment shop.
Store.
That's another really nice way to go.
Yeah. And, of course, online, there's something called ThreadUp, apparently, where you can sell your clothes. You can actually, it's a consignment store online, or I guess you could donate them. They send you a bag, and you fill it up, and they take a look at it. And if it's, you can send them high-quality brands, fashion brands, and they'll consign them online.
All right.
I think there's recent legislation in France to prevent fashion companies from destroying their clothes. You've got
what's that about?
Well, you've got some companies that get a lot of money for their garments, and they have leftover garments, and rather than putting that on the secondary market, which will undermine their ability to charge the prices they do, they dump them. They shred them, they dump them, they destroy them so that they won't enter the market. And I think France recently passed legislation to prevent them from doing that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Here's a little statistic. We trash 14 million tons of clothing each year in the United States.
Wow.
80 pounds per person.
What do you mean trash? You mean it goes into the landfills?
Garbage. Diverting these textiles from landfills into recycling programs would be like taking 7.3 million cars off the road. This is according to a company called Pasco, which makes sustainable.
So recycling the fabrics, because I've thrown away clothing that I thought, it's not good enough for the thrift store,
Yeah.
So where do I go?
Where do you go? That's the question.
See, I'm not even aware that. Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying that brings up a really great point. I'm really hoping that we start moving in California towards legislation to introduce a third recycling bin, which is just for clothing, and then have it centralized, because as it goes, when we throw away clothing, a lot of it, if it doesn't get sent off, gets to an incinerator nearby. So how do we really start to curb that? So much clothing does get thrown away. If it's, worn and tattered or ripped, and it's not going to get bought by someone else. So you brought up a great question, Sally.
Yeah.
Great point.
I work on my car a lot, so everything I don't wear turns into rags.
Rags.
Yeah.
I remember after the Paradise Fire last year, they needed clothing, and they got so much clothing they had to tell people stop. Yeah, they had piles and piles of clothing they couldn't pass on.
One of my when I was 16, I think we went on a school trip into Scandinavia and Russia and all that. And one of my big memories was of being on a dockside in Helsinki, and there were these bales of cotton waste. I mean, huge bales of cotton waste. I don't know, 5 foot high and maybe 5 foot square bales of compressed cotton waste. It was all cut into sort of ribbons and things. I pulled some out and made a nice necklace out of it. But that must still be going on somewhere. Somebody is still recycling, are they not? Or is cotton just so cheap and plentiful now that they think we don't have to do that?
I think it might still be going on. I think we've seen, last year, a few countries, like in Africa and in India as well, say they're no longer accepting our trash. So it's has to find a new place to go. But I don't think that's slowed down. We just don't see it. I mean, you had great opportunity to see that those bales are still going out.
They're still out there in the containers.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another. This is from the truecostmovie.com. I think everyone needs to see this, including me. I've watched some of the trailers, but I haven't had time because I just found out about it.
I think you'll find it very rewarding once you do sit down and watch it.
Yeah, it's a feature-length doc about the true cost of the clothing industry. The world now consumes about 80 billion new pieces of clothing every year. This is 400% more than the amount we consumed just 2 decades ago.
Wow.
90% of cotton is now genetically modified, using vast amounts of water and chemicals.
You know, and this is what just infuriates me is how much we as consumers are up against that we can't tangibly know about. We can't see it, smell it, touch it, taste it, but it's impacting us. And it's a slow, gradual impact and then we go to the doctor and they prescribe us pills and, you know, we don't realize that it could be what we're wearing, what we're putting on our skin, what we're putting in our bodies. And that's harming us.
I think it's information. More people know, the more choices they can demand. I just remember, 10 years ago, you never found an organic food section, let alone a store that really. The stores were tiny little stores. We had one here, Paper Mill Creek store, was it? It would be a fringe marketing, and now more people learned about it, more people started demanding on it, and so now you have Safeway, massive. I think what is it? Walmart is probably the largest purveyor of organic food in the country.
What? Really?
I know.
Yeah, and that's consumer demand. So if
consumer demand from information based on people understanding something new.
And thanks to organizations like Fashion Revolution and some of the others, the information is getting out there if we can find it.
And that website is really packed full of information and really eye-opening kind of questions about, all the aspects that go into the creation of the clothing. And, it really makes you think.
Yeah, and there are more companies that are filling in the need or servicing our needs in that way. I think that's very encouraging. When it's consumer demand drives everything, as you always say, Stephen. It's consumer,
the buyer holds the key.
The buyer holds the key, and we don't feel like that because mostly we're dealing with huge corporations, international corporations, and we feel sort of lost, but they're always listening.
If you can organize the people that make the purchases, they'll change.
There's apparently there's a World Ethical Apparel Roundtable happening in October this year. I don't know where that's happening, but yes, I do. Toronto. There you go. Toronto. Oh, that was the first article when I was doing the homework for the show. The first article that came up was about the Made in Canada label. It was from an Ontario newspaper, and it was about the scam of, in that case, Made in Canada. I'm sure it applies to the U.S. as well, where they assemble all the clothing in Asia, Vietnam or somewhere, comes back to Canada, they put a zipper on it, and that label.
And that's how they get away with
that's
it.
That's how, Made in Canada.
Yeah, so I guess that brings us back.
And now that article came out, and suddenly this one company, Moose Knuckles or something it's called, is now being held accountable and being prosecuted for lying, basically.
Oh, okay.
I think Republicans, all their new flags and all their printing.
The MAGA hats, all made in China.
All made in China. No shame.
Give us a call. We have a few minutes left. 415-663-8492. We have a special guest with us on the phone, Tiffany Samoy-Davy, and she works with the fashionrevolution.org, which is an activist watchdog over the fashion industry. And helping to get information out there, putting grades on companies, how ethical they are and how sustainable their practices are.
Yeah, and getting us to ask the question, who made my clothes, to stop and think about it and not just look at the price tag and go, oh, yeah, deal.
So,
right.
Yeah, it's important. The information is always the key. And I
have a question for Tiffany. So it's made. Let's say it's made in the United States. What are the working conditions here?
I'm glad you asked that. Also, quite not where they should be. It's a lot of the same things that birthed the ILGWU as the first union here in our country. We may not be having the same large catastrophes other factories are having, but there are still deficiencies, whether that's anywhere from pay to, and that could be in the case where you are employing people who are possibly in the, in steps of getting their paperwork done. You're able to threaten and, pay them less than, let's say,
exploiting immigrant labor,
minimum wage, breaks, working conditions, fire and safety codes not up to par. I think I saw a statistic somewhere for California at least that there may be up to 2 code violations per factory, and that was something that I wish I had that in front of me right now to tell you where I exactly saw that. But if you were to just look up, California production of clothing, there are some substantial reports that do follow, and I think that's just being brought up here, just possibly because we don't manufacture on such a scale as Bangladesh or China or now Ethiopia as a new manufacturer. It's out of sight, out of mind. Many of us don't even think our clothes are made here anymore, so we're not questioning what the conditions are if we're not within the industry.
Yeah, I saw that statistic somewhere where maybe it was Fashion Takes Action, another watchdog group here in the States. 50%, they say, of the garment factories in the U.S. are sweatshops.
How do you define
a sweatshop? I don't know. Or are violating at least 2 labor codes. Yeah, that's... a popular European fashion retailer was exposed as allowing sweatshop conditions in a manufacturing facility in the UK as well, with flouted health and safety rules, impossible employee production targets, and 100-hour work weeks.
Oh, my gosh.
That's a sweatshop.
Okay.
That's kind of a sweatshop. 100 hours.
100-hour week and, not paying them anything.
So we think we don't have slavery anymore.
Right.
Well.
With wage slavery.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would suggest buying less. Buying fewer clothes.
That's the answer.
Buying better quality clothes. Saving up for a shirt. What the heck.
And being aware of the good companies versus the bad ones. Who's inspecting, who isn't.
Yeah, take a look at Fashion Takes Action and Fashion Revolution, and there are lists of these newer companies that are coming up that are supposedly really being very ethical and conscious about their production methods, and it's worthwhile checking them out. I mean, even if you have to do it online, I usually have to do it online because most places don't have, like my shoes. I have to buy shoes online. Because I have size 14 feet. Nah.
Well, you had better buy them online, yeah.
He buys boats.
I do. I buy canoes. And
I just want to give a shout out to Meow in Long Beach. That's where I met Tiffany. I was visiting in Long Beach and popped into Meow because I used to love to hang out on 4th Street. And
Meow is a clothing store?
A vintage clothing store.
Vintage clothing.
Yeah, and well, you can speak to it a little better, but we only have about a minute left. If you want to say any last things.
Yeah, I use my platform and being able to talk to folks on the ground every day about these very questions at a vintage store in which I've worked for 5 years. Been working for 10 years with the recycled industry, essentially taking opportunities to force people to ask themselves why would they buy something they're only going to wear once, because I hear that. You'd be surprised just about every day. Meow's been there for 33 years, founded Retro Row in Long Beach, and always glad to take any opportunity to have conversations with folks about how we can make changes.
Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you calling in. That was fabulous. It's good to have someone who actually knows about the subject that we're talking about. It's such a refreshing change.
Wait a minute. I just want to put one last thing in.
Yeah.
You know, when I buy something that's really nice, I don't want to wear it because it's too nice to wear.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, stop it.
Life in the country, yeah. Life in the barn, in the boonies.
You can't dance in it. You can't have it.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you are. There's words to live by. Thank you very much, Tiffany, for being our guest today.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for your work.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Yours. Bye now.
Bye. And this has been Let's Talk. And I would just like to point out that KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you to Tiffany Simoy Davey.
And happy 4th of July.
A fine Cornish name, Davey. Happy 4th of July. Be careful. Watch out for mad people on the road and flying fireworks. Who knows? They're illegal, aren't they? Yes, they are. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back next Thursday.